through all the motions, a roll call,
Right.
moment of silence, the whole 9 yards.
And what about Bob?
That's what I said, I don't know.
I heard from him.
Maybe he's calling to check or something. Let's just give Julius some.
Did you hear from Bob? No, I didn't hear that he wasn't attending. Dan Carter did reach out.
And
Yes, this would be, it would be recorded.
no, I have it. I just want.
Yep.
Are we ready to get started? Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and start a regular work session meeting of the Ada Township Board, Monday, June 29th, 2026. Could we all please stand for a moment to say the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dr. Marco, if you will please call the roll.
Supervisor Korth,
Here.
Treasurer Moran,
Here.
Clerk DeMarco here, Trustee Hurwitz,
Here.
Trustee Damstra,
Here.
Trustee Carter, absent, Trustee Prose, I'm gonna say absent for now, and we haven't
Correct,
heard.
yep.
Okay,
All right, so we have an agenda in front of us tonight, or this afternoon, that includes our board member training. The second item to discuss residential architectural standards in the PBM overlay district, discussion on regular work session topics, and just normal public comment. So would someone move to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Support.
Thank you. Moved by Trustee Hurwitz, supported by Trustee Damstra. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 That motion carries unanimously. Okay, so now we're ready to go into the first public comment of this afternoon. Would any member of the public like to come up for anything? Please come on up, if you would. Nevin?
Nevin Zelensky, 6151 3 Mile Road. I'm going to say first off, the idea of an architectural overlay for the village, great idea. Smart minds here put it together and try to put something together everyone can live with and looks nice, I guess, and still allows for a little personal freedom when you're out there building your house. One of the things I wanted to comment about here is, and I'm going to try to do it as polite as possible, and I don't plan on staying for your whole work session because I got a bunch of things to do, but I viewed it as an opportunity to speak out on it. And just to say, I'm really disappointed with the bridge that's over the river. Whoever architecturally designed that bridge and signed off on that bridge design really lost sight of spatiality and the decor of the village. And one of the beauties of being in Ada is when you drive by all of the buildings that are along Legacy Park and the river there, you can see them. When you come all across over here from the south and you're driving along there, you see this quaint little village, you see all the restaurants, you see the park, you see the river. It's kind of a glance of activity. Now what do you see? You see a wall of metal. You don't see the businesses anymore. You don't see anything. It's just a wall of metal, and it looks too big, out of place. It reminds me of those kind of old railroad track metal enclosures that they used to put around trains, or something you would do to block off blighted areas down a highway in Detroit. It's just massive. And I really think the mental design does not go with the decor of Ada Bridge. I mean, the Ada Bridge out there, to reconstruct that in its own materials, is probably $2 million. But it has a certain decor and architecture for the village. And what you have here is a modernist railroad track blocking the view of the village as you come across the river. Given its size, I think it should have been actually put over the middle of the river more. I mean, if you're going to build something that big with that much scale, It should have been farther away from the bridge that's already there. But just my observation. It's unfortunate, but I just think it just doesn't look good. And please don't put a sign on it, because that'll just make that even more obscene. I know you got a big side there. I don't know, maybe you'll try to plaster Ada Village on it. You don't need to do that. But I'm on voice. If you guys want to put a sign on it, put a sign on it. But other than that, just one other quick comment. And I've talked to Julius about this before. You do not have a bike trail on Egypt Valley Avenue, and you were supposed to put one on Pettus, but you didn't do it. As you know, 2 people have died riding bikes on Egypt Valley. Egypt Valley and 3 Mile Road there, that is Cornerstone University and Calvin University. They jog through there, do their cross-country training, and there's an 8-mile mountain bike loop that goes through there that exits on 3 Mile Road. You need a bike trail down that road all the way to 4 Mile, because people park their cars to go down that 8-mile mountain bike loop that comes around. But 2 people are dead. They were riding bikes, they were hit by cars. Seems like we should consider that and take some action for that part of bike trail. Because I see all these signs all over, like I'm on a national park, and I got all these signs directing me to the special spot I am in Ada. There's a blue sign out there, like I'm at spot 5 and someplace on the bike trail. I just think you spend all that money on that, but you don't even have equitable bike trails for everyone in the township. So why are you spending money on fancy signs when we should be spending money on asphalt and engineering? So just my observation. Thank you for your service. I appreciate you letting me speak, and you have a wonderful day, and stay cool. Try not to melt out there.
You too,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to come up? Okay. We'll close the public comment and move on to our first item of new business, which is our board training with Eric Walcott, Senior Specialist Government and Community Vitality from MSU Extension.
Joe, if you can hit the laptop 5 on that screen. Yeah. Then it should go to his. Try it one more time. Oh, no, sorry. I'm 5. Podium, sorry. Sorry. You're doing it right. I'm just telling you wrong.
All right, well, good afternoon. Thanks for having me here. I love this space here, the old church. Yeah, beautiful. I grew up in Grand Rapids area, but haven't been to Ada Township Hall, so cool to be here for the first time. My name's Eric Walcott. I am a senior specialist with MSU Extension's Government and Community Vitality programs. What that means is I'm based on campus at MSU, but I work statewide doing trainings for local governments, mixture of kind of workshops like these with local boards. We do a lot of training of newly elected officials, a lot of training in local government finance, other issues that come up in communities. I work with a team of educators who are based all over the state, and an Extension, as you may know, is active in every county in the state and has been for over 100 years. So appreciate the opportunity to be here and work with you all today, and hope that, you know, down the road as things come up, you'll continue to think of Extension as a resource, you know, as issues come up that you're dealing with. My plan for today, these are kind of broad topics that I kind of will talk a little bit about, kind of some board structure and roles, and then we have a framework we call Components of Extraordinary Governance. That is a set of practices that we have found work really well with local government boards across the state. It's some things that some of my colleagues over the years have pulled together, and then we've kind of adapted. But as we go through, I have, you know, a few dialogue prompts and some questions for you all that I'd love to get some input on, but always feel free to jump in, ask questions, give feedback. This will be more engaging the more actively that you all participate. But yeah, so I guess we'll kind of dive in with that. And my first question is, I think it's actually a question for all of you. How would you describe the role of the Township Board? So don't think of yourselves as individual members, think collectively. What's the role of the Township Board?
Stewards of the township.
Yeah. I was gonna say.
Did you hear that?
Sustain the township in a productive way.
Okay.
Help represent the community.
Represent the community. Okay.
Since we're elected, and it's a representative form of government, ideally, we're supposed to be a representation of the collective wishes of the community, and that through our noodling and back and forth and then ultimate voting, we end up with what the majority of the people in the township would expect us to do. On, bigger decisions that someone has to make.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. Anyone else?
Pretty well said.
Yeah. All right. So then let's shift then and think. How would you describe your role as an individual on the board? Right. So first thinking about the board as a whole. Now, what's your role as an individual board member as part of the board?
Well, I'll start by saying I'm going to go according to the statutory responsibilities. I think my biggest as clerk is to effectively, accurately, and transparently administer elections. That's at the top. After that, there's more. There's ordinances. There's cemetery management. There's record keeping. There's a lot of time management responsibilities, and the day just isn't long enough for all of them. And I wish I would have known about you and what you do, especially with working with new elected officials, because I was left to my own resources, and I did reach out, and if we're going to be real open and transparent here, didn't get responses. So you're kind of left to your own devices.
Yeah, in township form of government, right, clerk and treasurer are kind of unique roles that in a lot, when I work with counties or cities, the council, everyone's kind of, they're the elected, they're there for that oversight role, so maybe a little bit more like the trustees. In the townships, the clerk and treasurer have the, statutory responsibilities, and I'll talk a little bit about that.
Well, and I'm fortunate that I have a lot of relationships at the state level, and I do work with them, and this was like a pet peeve of mine that I said, you need to be more interactive, because for my role anyway, there's the government end of it, which is the election process. We take our direction from our county and then ultimately the state, and the state has a responsibility to get more actively involved in the newly elected officials. But then on the township level, where the rest of the statutory duties fall, that is more of a collaborative effort, I think, in understanding it all. And then the rest of it is left up to me personally. It's my engagement with the public. It's my understanding of what they're, and to speak to what Tom said, and I agree, it's to be their voice.
Okay. Others, how would you describe your role as an individual member of the board?
I'll go.
Yeah.
I think part of the purpose we got you here, I've been around on the board since, I believe, 2003. So I'm kind of the old guy around here, but I do know, and we've always managed and have grown the township with common sense. And as a representative of the board, I've tried to kind of try to teach how we've gotten to here, so that as I leave and as others continue to govern, that they would govern with what I would say the same excellence as we've had in the past. And so our goal is to take what we've had to begin with and continue to grow it. And the purpose of you coming today is kind of, how do we lasso this in so that we're all on the same page? Because there seems to be, this is not a unified board. In fact, quite honestly, it's quite the opposite.
Can I ask a question? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Why do you think that is? And I agree with you, but why do you think that is?
That's for another whole discussion.
It might come up later.
Okay. Okay, no, well, thank you. No, I'm glad.
The role of a board member is to be
representative of our residents, of the community. And the reality is that we all come in with biases, with ideas, with thoughts personally. But I think we have to look at, when we're in here representing, it's not what we want to see personally happen. We have to understand that we wear a different hat in this position. Understand that we are looking for the good of the community as a whole, building upon what's been happening in the past. And I think, respecting the history, while I think responsibly looking at how do we build for the future in a manner that benefits all the residents long term. And I think that the big balance is somehow that balance between what we personally want and what is good for the community aren't always in alignment, but we need to find the way that it balances between the two.
Yeah, it's a tough balance sometimes to find that perfectly.
I would say, I mean, it actually evolves. I mean, I'm just reflecting back to when I was newly elected as a board member, not so much as the treasurer, but as a board member. I mean, I listened, sat back, kind of sought the counsel of those who had been here before me, and then as I grew more confident and got my arms around issues within the township, then my voice became stronger, and probably today it's probably as strong as it's ever been compared to the 8 years ago, only because, again, of how long I've been here, 10 years now, and just kind of bringing some of the history and how we got to where we got when it comes to certain issues. But I think my role as a board member, above and beyond all that, is to listen and to be open-minded. You know, to Dan's point, I mean, we may have a preconceived notion on things, but, you know, when you listen to a resident, or the residents just show up en masse with a problem that is concerning to them, I listen. Yeah. And then we make our decisions collectively as a board. So, you know, it's always evolving in my mind. It's a lot different than when I first started, but it is as a representative of the community. I mean, and, you know, being here, being present, you know, they elected me, and I'm here to serve on their behalf.
Yeah, thanks.
Erin, anything to say?
Yeah, I feel like I want to be part of the team. So yeah, I'm here learning echo a lot of what Kevin said. So yeah, I'm more quiet in general, but I'm learning and listening, and again, seek counsel when I need it.
And I think as we go through today, one thing I want to just kind of maybe try and keep front of mind is thinking of, you know, there's the role of the township board, right? You are one body, and then we all bring our individual selves into our role as a board member. But thinking of kind of how do we make those mesh, right? Because separate from, obviously the clerk has specific statutory responsibilities and the treasurer has specific statutory responsibilities that, you know, and you all are familiar, and I'll kind of touch on those. When you're together as a board, your authority is as one body. Your voice as the leaders of this community, as elected officials, is as one body. And so I think that's just, as we go through some of the conversations today, helpful to kind of keep in mind what's your role as an individual and your role as a collective. So I'm going to start. This is just kind of some high-level overview, kind of you know, roles, responsibilities related to township government. You all are probably pretty familiar with this, so I won't spend a ton of time on this. But in terms of legislative role, board, you know, there's three kind of main functions, right? Setting policy, big picture, including the budget. You know, that's in most cases in local government the most important policy document. That's setting your priorities for the year. And you know, when we do specific budget workshops, one of the things that we're always focusing on is how do you connect those budget decisions to your bigger picture priorities. So if you have a strategic plan in place, or you know, a master plan, those types of kind of long-term planning documents, how are you connecting your big picture, your big budget decisions to those long-term plans, and really focusing on, does the budget move us in that direction, and focusing really on just, again, that direction and those big picture priorities. Legislative oversight, again, that's just that monitoring progress towards goals, you know, making sure that you're reviewing reports, understanding the options so that you can make informed decisions, gathering information. So that may be public hearing, public comment, but that also may mean informally, right? You all connecting with people in the community, hearing from your neighbors, from residents, people across the community, people who stop you at the grocery store, whatever, and then working with the manager, right? Holding them accountable to their job without micromanaging and getting in the way of doing their job. And then constituent services, right? That might mean helping residents navigate services, helping residents understand where to go for services, acting as a liaison for that, not directly as a problem solver in most cases, again, as your role as a board member. Partnering, helping people connect to the person, on staff that they should be working with to try and resolve an issue. And so that's kind of that important piece, right? For the board, it's that partnership with administrative staff to carry out all of those functions. So in terms of, township powers, again, probably this is mostly overview, but obviously we have our basic mandated services, assessment, elections, tax collection, other services that certainly are permitted by state law, but not necessarily mandated. Ordinance authority, your powers come from the state, kind of broad ordinances that regulate health, safety, and general welfare. Obviously cannot contravene state law. But then this last point is, again, kind of touching on what I mentioned briefly, that collective authority for board decisions. When you all make a decision, you make that decision as a board, that on board decisions, no one of you has authority, right? You all individually have that. And so that's where I think it becomes really important to think about how are we being thoughtful in our decision-making process? What's your role when you're at this table in terms of board members? And how are we making sure that we're focusing on, again, what's the big picture? Where do we want to be? Who do we want to be as a township? How do we want people to see us as a township board? And how do we work together to make sure we're thoughtful in decisions and making decisions that, as I've heard each of you kind of touch on, are for the best for the community. And, obviously multiple different people, you're gonna have different perspectives on exactly how to get there. But what I heard in kind of each of you and your answers to the role of the board and your individual is wanting what is best for your community. So I think just emphasizing that working together with that collective mindset and collective voice in terms of the decisions you make can be a really important thing to keep in mind. So 2 other kind of things we talk about, policy and governance, right? Policy is laws, regulations, procedures, decisions that you may adopt as a board. Governance is really the process. How do we get there, right? So what are the processes, practices, the way that you all do things? I think the policy is the thing at the end that people may see. The process, if people are here in the meeting and seeing you deliberate towards decisions, see what information you're basing decisions on, is one of the ways that people see, and make their decisions on, or their judgments of, do I think this is a group that's working effectively together, or what's the process there? So we kind of look at policy and governance, decisions that we make to shape programs, services, and then how we go about making those decisions. So just some board member skills that we've seen, that seem to be important across the state in terms of the work that we've done. Providing leadership by example, being kind of, that visionary, forward thinking, and good communicator, ethical behavior, accountable and responsible for decisions, focusing on results rather than activities. That's one I often talk about a lot when it comes to budget stuff, is how do we focus on outcomes rather than outputs? So, you may have a department that has, a certain amount of funding, rather than looking at, how many of XYZ, how many activities did we support with that, or how many people, what is the impact, right? What's the outcome of that funding that you're allocating in your budget process, and evaluating based on that. That's gonna help you connect budget decisions to those long-term goals in a more productive way, and kind of evaluate, are we actually making progress towards those? Because if you run a bunch of programs that, that may be good, But if they don't actually have any impact, or the impact isn't what you want, then that's when you kind of reevaluate. So being approachable and receptive to citizen concerns, and then what I heard a few people also say as part of your role, that listening to understand, right? Just listening to understand each other. What are the perspectives that you all bring when you're working with staff? Listening to understand the things they're bringing in your community, obviously. Listening to understand not just, I think of the guy who was in here earlier, for public comment, not just like what was the position that he's holding, but what's behind that, right? What's the value in the community that he holds that motivated him to come today and speak on what he was speaking. I think that often for me, when I'm in, making decisions on difficult topics, whether I agree or disagree with someone, if I can understand what's the thing that got them to this position, that's going to really help me have a good conversation, work through those disagreements, and maybe not end up agreeing, but at least being able to have a good conversation about it. What else? What are other things that you think, as you've been on the board, as you've maybe in other settings, what are other skills that you've found are important to being successful in your role?
Management, being in management,
Okay.
managing a staff,
Mhm.
working collaboratively with a team is very important.
Yeah, so the management.
We are a team.
Mhm.
We are a team.
Yeah.
This is a very good team. And for those of us who are here on a day-to-day basis, myself, Treasurer Moran, with Manager Suchi, it's great. So I think that's important.
Yeah, and I think the management piece is probably one that's particular to clerk, treasurer, manager roles, whereas the trustees, traditionally that role is less involved in day-to-day things and more of kind of some of the things I had in the previous slides, that policy oversight, being thoughtful about decisions in board meetings, but certainly, that those management skills and attention to all of the things that have to happen on a day-to-day basis are important. Who else?
I'm going to throw something else out there. I love your last bullet point that says listens to understands. One of the mantras that I live by, that I was taught at a very young age, is listen as well as you speak. You have to be able to hear what people are saying, and sometimes it isn't what we want personally, but again, as a manager, and I've had this conversation recently, sometimes we do have to step back and just listen to the voice of the population closest to us and realize if this is what they all collectively want, well, then it's time for me to take a step back for a minute and let it go their way. That, I think, is a very key component of a good manager as well.
Yeah, thanks.
I think that's well said, actually.
All right, so this has kind of come up a little bit already, but I'll just kind of touch on a little bit. One of the things that makes township government in Michigan unique, and compared to other local units, is we have this. We have the clerk and the treasurer on the board that have specific statutory, responsibilities for day-to-day management that the trustees do not have. And again, when I work with county commissioners, everyone there has the exact same role in almost every case. Same with cities. City councilors all have the exact same role. Townships a little bit different because we have these differing roles. And so together, right, you are the legislative body: clerk, treasurer, trustees, supervisor. Together, the board sets policy and direction, adopts the budget, oversees the finances, provides that oversight for service provision, right? That's your collective role as a board. Clerk and treasurer, right? State law assigns specific duties. And then the trustees, kind of, again, that core responsibility is, that policy process, providing oversight in terms of budget, and then kind of giving that feedback in terms of, are we making progress on the goals that we want to? If as different departments or the manager gives their reports on things that are going on, trustees actively participating in that dialogue and decision-making process in meetings, and contributing to the decision-making process. And then the clerk and treasurer serve as board members and part of all of those conversations and the voice in those processes and vote. But then also you are department heads with defined duties and authorization in those capacities. Right, so these are clearly not all of the responsibilities, but just kind of the ones that typically come to mind when we think of clerk and treasurer responsibilities. Maintaining records, elections, reports, treasurer collecting taxes, receiving revenues, managing accounts, lots of other things. So I would love to get some input from a few of you. How do those different roles influence how discussions happen, right? Whether it's trustees coming in and you're interacting with treasurer or clerk, or the treasurer and the clerk, how does bringing those kind of different hats to the table influence how your discussions happen here?
Okay, my office gets the majority of the incoming phone calls from residents, and there is no boundary as to what those calls are for just a magnitude of everything. You take those calls, you field them to whatever actual department they belong to or should be directed to, but a lot of them are calls for issues. And that brings the information to me as these are bullet points that need to be addressed. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, when you start getting a whole bunch of phone calls, especially within 1 week or a 2-week period, or even throughout the summer, that tells me that these are issues that are of great concern, and we need to do something about this. Case in point, I'll bring up our favorite subject on this board: solicitation, door knockers. That's something that starts as soon as the weather starts getting warm. Mm-hmm. That has caused a lot of how should I put this? Colorful conversation on this board. And what I've tried to convey is, when my office gets 66 calls from complaints of residents within a 2-week period, that's serious. But I do believe that even though having me say that, my words, the words of my staff, the words of the Kent County Sheriff's Department don't mean anything, because other people have different ideas, or they have different thoughts about what is going on.
So I guess the question I have is, when we talk about the different roles and how they influence board discussions, I think there's a big disconnect sometimes between when we're in this room together, we're in one role as a board. We have other roles that are done statutorily outside of that role, and I think the confusion happens sometimes is when we're mixing up the two, that none of us signed up for this position without knowing what was involved. We all ran for a position, we all ran for the board, we ran for a clerk, we ran for those. We knew what the job entailed. And I think that's the challenge, is understand that we all have different jobs. Some of us are here with other jobs during the day. We're part-time in this role as a trustee, but the reality is I think we need to somehow find that balance, that there are day jobs and there are board jobs. And I think the key is, how do we manage to realize that within this position here, when we're working together, what is the role that's empowered by us to serve in that role. And I think sometimes we wander in that because we're getting into individual topics, individual things that affect day to day. But I think the challenge is making sure as a board that we're functioning for what the role of the greater board should be, not the statutory duties. I think that's where the balance comes in sometimes.
That comes in quite a bit, but I'd like to rewind. When we hired you to come in, we want you to come in and tell us how to run a meeting. I don't need to know about all the situations that Kevin has or everyone else has. We're here with an agenda to discuss the agenda, to make the best decision for the agenda. Would you please go over how to do a meeting, how to hold a meeting? Because there's some weakness here in this board, the proper way to do it. And I would just touch on it.
I think that's a topic later, correct?
Is that a topic later?
So, I mean, I can briefly kind of touch on some piece of that. I would say, I mean, if you want more detail in kind of effective meetings, we have specific training that really focuses on that. That, you know, I'd be happy to, you know, come back and do some time or kind of send some resources. But I think like, you know, you say you have the agenda, and as you work through that, I think one of the challenges that I'm hearing here is balancing whether it's, you know, balancing the roles, but then also balancing what is information that is a board decision and a board issue compared to things that are like information that's coming in that may be useful for the board to know, but whether or not everyone needs to be involved in how things operate on a day-to-day basis and what that appropriate level of engagement is.
Okay, so my question to that is, and this is maybe to both of you, is I guess I don't understand how you could be on a board and divorce yourself from the day-to-day activities or situations that occur that would lead more full-time people like Kevin and myself to be proponents of certain issues that we will ultimately vote on. You understand what I'm saying?
Well, in regards to that, since you've mentioned my name a couple times, in answer to the question, I don't view myself as having a different role as a treasurer. I come in here collectively, independently. We all have an agenda, to Bob's point, and we focus on that. Now, I think the word that I dislike is influence. I'm not here to influence anybody. My job as treasurer is to point out a discrepancy, something that was calculated wrong, and if that influences or persuades somebody, that's fine. But I'm not here to influence, and I certainly don't walk in here thinking I'm the treasurer and I'm above everybody. I consider myself one of 7 people, and that's it. So again, I know we have duties. We probably have more contact with residents. You know, everybody has friends, everybody has neighbors, they're talking to people. We have the day-to-day stuff, so we probably hear a little bit more. But at the end of the day, I don't bring all that in here. I think those are things that I try and address outside of the boardroom, and if it needs to be elevated or if it needs to be a policy, then that's when the board has a discussion. But I truthfully have never thought of myself as any different than my fellow board members, clerk, supervisor, trustees.
And I apologize if I came across as that's what I was trying to.
Yeah, I know what you're
Those are
saying.
not the
I
words
just
I was
wanted
trying
to
put
throw that out there
right,
because
I don't think that way
that's
either,
my viewpoint.
right. I just meant that the things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis might have more weight in some of the things that we have to vote on or talk about.
It may, but that's for the trustees to decide. That's, you know, again, I'm here to present. I may not like something. I'm pointing something out. I don't like the cost of something, or we're over budget, or whatever it may be. But that's for my fellow trustees to decide, and that's where it ends.
And I'll just clarify, when the question framing, my intent was not how do the treasurer and clerk influence that. It's the dynamic of having the dual roles being different than other levels of local government, right? How does that just make board discussions different because
and like I said,
multiple people carry those dual roles?
Aside from that, I don't think of myself as treasurer as being any different than my fellow trustees. That's how I feel. That's how I approach every board meeting.
And I think to some extent, that's kind of, you know, not having been there when state law was written, but to some extent, that was the intent, was that you have your day-to-day responsibilities, you know, that are statutorily defined, that certainly the things you experience there, the things you come across there, some of those you're bringing to the board because they are things the board has oversight, you know, of in some way or impacts in some way. Some of them you're bringing that information because it helps guide your individual decision making, or maybe valuable information for the board to hear. But I do think to some extent also, when the way the statute's set up is your day-to-day is not separate from your role here as a board member. But there is some division there where here you're a board member, and then you go into the office, and then you have those specific responsibilities that are your responsibilities, and not the responsibility directly of everybody here.
A comparative analogy is that as this township has grown and evolved, we have a very strong Parks Department lead. We have a very strong DDA Development Director. We have a very strong planning directorship. They come to us with information when there's an agenda item that specifically relates to those tasks and duties. And clearly we want their input at that time. And so that, but at the same time, none of those folks have a voice on the board. And so what we're trying, and I think the discussion's trying to unfold here, is that relationship between gathering all that day-to-day information and presenting it in an as-needed basis to us. And to Joe's point, a lot of the things that she's really tried to talk and communicate with us about have been specific observations related to, say, the cemetery or the solicitation ordinance and the various things. And that input, I think as a department head, no different than, say, Wesley Deason talking about something passionately about the parks or something, should be allowed to be presented. But at the same time, that presentation kind of is in the context of presenting unbiased, as best as you can, unbiased information and allow the board to digest it in the capacity that they're able to independently, putting on their reasonable citizen hat as they listen to it, as they ultimately then come up to make, whatever decision they make related to the motion at hand. And
that's the secret to the motion at hand. We got to stop tangents. We got to stop personal agendas. We're one board unified to take care of a set of problems that you guys up on this end of the table put together as the hot topics for the meeting to discuss, to make decisions on, that are further discussed by groups, be it the Parks Department or a group of people looking at things, making a decision to make a recommendation. The recommendation comes, we discuss it, we decide yes, no, or maybe so. And I think that is where we have to make sure that we, as a board, are concentrating on, the way I like to put it, on the things that are important, not the things that could be discussed. Because if we start talking about anything and everything that could be discussed, we could be here for years, but that's not our role.
I think it's important to realize that we all have a vote. And the key is that we have to, as a collective whole, have to come up with information in hand, vote on it. And there are times we've had, votes here where we've had, the three, the clerk, the treasurer, and our supervisor. We had a vote on the building that we bought, and one looked to buy, and it was, clear it was one vote, it was 4-3. And it was, but we were able to go on from that. I think the key is understanding that we're going to have challenges on things, we're going to have decisions on that, but the reality is just because something's brought up and can be passionately presented doesn't mean we're going to go that way. And I think that's the key, is understanding that we're all representing, our constituents in a manner that we deem appropriate. And there is no right or wrong answer to a vote. A vote is the collective group as a whole making a decision based upon the information as we're interpreting it. I think that's sometimes the danger, is the realization of it's not always going to go one way or the other way. I think that's the key. From the whole, if you look at the record of voting, we've done a pretty good job of doing that. But I think the key is when I just think all of us should make sure that we don't come in with a thumb on the scale. That's the challenge, is because then they don't become discussions. They become, from any one of us, can become passionate, convicted, passionate statements with conviction, and then when it doesn't go your way, it doesn't feel good. And I think the key is making sure we maintain that way.
Yeah, and that last bit, when a decision doesn't go the way that you want it, there's going to be some element always of that not feeling great. One of the things we actually talk about in some of our meetings training is, the phrasing of putting a motion on the table. One of the things we kind of emphasize is put the motion on the table, not yourself on the table. you make the motion, and then it is now the motion in front of the board. And obviously there are things that individually you're going to care deeply about and believe strongly in, and it's challenging, but being able to put that on the table and not take the, if the vote doesn't go the way you want it as, this is a rejection of me as a person or me in my role. Maybe it's a rejection or a no for now of an idea that you have or something you support. And that's obviously part of that back and forth kind of in terms of how do we work through, we're going to disagree, right? You all want what is best for your township, and you probably all have slightly different ideas of what that looks like and different ideas how to get there. But how do we continue to say, yep, I know that we're going to disagree on some things, we're going to agree on others, and tomorrow, next board meeting, we have to be able to continue to work together. So let's continue on. I think we'll come back to some more questions related to some of this as we go. But just really briefly on township manager role, state law doesn't say a lot about township managers except that they provide some duties as directed by the board, and that consent is required of other officials, being the clerk, or supervisor, clerk, and treasurer, if the manager is going to be assigned any of those statutory roles. That's kind of the section in state law right there.
Can you go back to that 1 second?
Yeah.
So it says those duties are delegated by law to another township official unless consent has been granted.
Yeah.
Who gives that consent?
The clerk or the
Okay,
supervisor
so
or the treasurer.
it's
Yeah.
granted by the one with the statutory. Okay,
So yeah, so the board could, if there's a particular duty, could vote to say that they would like to assign that to the manager. If am I getting that wrong?
What are you doing?
All right, sorry. No, you're saying you don't want that.
I just want to know when it said consent was granted. I wasn't whether it was
Yeah,
statewide, it was someone else. It's granted within.
Basically, the board, the board. I think the intent probably as written was the trustees can't take a power away from the treasurer or the clerk without them saying yes, okay.
I just wanted, I'm not looking to give anything. I was just wondering who consent granted.
Julius is like, no more work. Yeah, so obviously, manager and administration broadly, the day-to-day coordination, leadership for staff, budget development, human resources, all these other things. And then these are skills that we often see as effective, in manager roles, financial management, negotiation, conflict resolution, listening and communication. A lot of overlap, actually, I think, in what the actual skills are. Just, again, some of the day-to-day implementation things that we see being really important. So a couple of questions before we move on to a few more things. What's something that you all think you do well as a board? What's the strength of this group together?
What I think we do well as a board, honestly, and being one of the new, we have 3 new members from the last election cycle, so that there's 3 of us that are learning kind of the ropes. Sitting here, nearly 2 years in at this point, or thereabouts, I think a willingness to come through each meeting, some quite bumpy, some not so bumpy, but each one I think ultimately has gotten better, and that we're committed to getting better. I think that's why we're here today, is for that very role. So I think we do that well, and I think that we also should compliment the tenured members of our board who are willing to walk through these steps with us. I mean, the mere fact that you guys are here today is testament that you want it to be successful as well. So I think that's the biggest thing. Obviously our broader decision making, I think we are doing an effective job of making the ultimate decision that collectively the community wants and expects. But I think from a working together perspective, though we're a work in process, we are getting better.
Yeah, I think what we do really well is that we're very present at meetings. I think that's a very strong thing that we do, is we're here, we're present, we're active. I think no one walks in the room not wanting to be here at the moment. I look at Bob and Bob's 20+ year history on this. I'm at 11 years. And I think the reality is it took me a long time to get to a comfort level. it took me a long time to really feel that it was, I spent a lot of time trying to get the feel of how things worked, how things happened, and it takes, and I think that's, the idea was having board members around me who were active, encouraging, being able to understand that we're in this together within this room, and when we walk out of this room, we're still talking in the parking lot, doing whatever, but we have a duty while we're here, and I think that the key is making sure we communicate. I don't think there's anything beyond that, but within the meeting, I think we're very present, active, and are willing to talk about the issues.
I don't think any of us are here because we dislike the community. We love the community. We've watched it. I've watched it for 20 years. We've all had the same intent. It's getting the intent properly displayed and focused. That makes sense.
I think we take a lot of pride in what's happened here in the township. It's been a pretty amazing run the last 11 years to watch what's happened, and then to look back and hear community members who know either whether you're on the board or not from East Grand Rapids, or they say, what is going on in Ada? I know you live in Ada. This is an amazing place, and you can talk about what's happening. And I think the key is I want to create an environment that we all enjoy living here and being part of it. But we also, someday when our terms are and we decide to move on, that we've helped build a tremendous community that we enjoy and we want to stay here.
I think and I'm not a board member, but I'll share something I think I appreciate as the manager, is that the board does not micromanage, and the board values the staff input. When we have a recommendation, when we have something that we bring to the board, I think the board takes that into consideration. It doesn't always go away, and I always work with staff to say, hey, this is why, and a perfect example is the tall grass ordinance. I know we've brought that up many times. And you bring it up, and the appetite's not there, and that's okay, and you move forward. And I think our board does a really good job. When there is a no, it's not personal. It's very much here's the reasons why we're not interested in considering it right now, and let's keep thinking about it. Let's continue to track. Let's continue to see how people are complaining about it, something like that. But that's something as a manager that I appreciate, is just the lack of micromanagement as well as the trust in the staff to do their job.
Well, I think part of that also is that it's tough to micromanage when you have a really good staff who does really good things and comes through and is clear.
And doesn't need micromanaging.
Right, I think that's the sense is, I think we've been very fortunate that we have enough dialogue along the way that there's not a lot of surprises.
Yeah.
And when they come up, I think we act relatively, when it comes to health, safety issues like that, when we make sure that the things for our residents that are important, we're gonna act. There's not a lot of, and granted, I also recognize that we also have a township that is budgetarily isn't as challenged as some others. So I know we're spoiled in that mind, but allows us to be successful.
Stop telling our contractors.
Don't come in with a change order. Bob will make sure you.
Yeah, I'll say, you made the comment about having good staff that don't need to be micromanaged. Having worked all over the state, that does not stop some people. There are a lot of communities where there's really capable professional staff and still, maybe not micromanaging, but members who their responsibility is not to be engaging in the detail of the day-to-day of what some staff person is doing or what particular business. And still trying to insert themselves into those spaces. I think that's a good thing. That's a good thing for a board to be able to recognize where, what's the appropriate level of involvement, right? You want to be involved enough to know what's going on so that you can make effective decisions here, but also not getting in the way of everyone else's jobs, their job responsibilities.
I think one other item, and I think about it every board meeting. We don't have many residents who attend our meetings.
Yeah.
And I take that as a testament to the public trusting the work that the board's doing. When I look across other communities like Cascade Township and others, that they might have packed rooms. And I think our board at different times has taken the right steps to listen and then respond, whether it's the parking study in the downtown, whether it's the township hall, whether any of the different components we've done, zoning ordinance update, master plan update, the parks millage. I mean, everything has been really intentional and well thought out, and I feel like each board member would be able to defend their position behind that And when there has been a time when things are about to get out of control, it gets reined back in. And you know, before we step over that line, it always seems to be okay. And so we haven't put ourselves in a position where we're on the news, we're upsetting significant groups of residents. I'm not saying everyone in Ada Township loves everything. I understand that. Clearly, the bridge. And that's okay. We've had a lot of good comments about the bridge. So,
Nevin didn't like it.
yeah, it's, no, he didn't. But that's okay.
Well, I think that lends to what we really do well as a board. I think we really vet issues really, really well. I mean, when Nevin comes in here and talks about the bridge and his dislike for it, and I appreciate his opinion, but I know we've discussed that, even down to the color of this bridge. And sometimes, like, I feel like, well, nobody really cares about the color, let's just go forward. But it's important so we as a board are aware of it, because I don't want to be surprised.
Right.
You know, I don't want to hear about, like, why didn't we think about that? And all the issues that he mentioned, I know we had discussed and thought about and vetted. So I think that's something that we as a board do really, really well.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, it sounds like a really engaged group, and yeah, I also think that sometimes generates some of the, you know, some tension in some places, because as you're really engaged, then people feel strongly about issues, and that can bring up some of those disagreements that you may feel more strongly about. But those are all good. These, you know, those things are all, I think, signs of effective boards. Like you said, making good decisions, being good stewards of your community. So this next slide, this is kind of introducing this components of extraordinary governance. Again, I said this is our kind of a framework that we've adopted, developed, kind of modeled from some other pieces over the years. But components are really just working really well together as a board. And so there's 10 components, and I'll kind of go through some of them more quickly, and then a couple others that I'll kind of pause on and we'll have some conversation. But they boil down to really 3 key points: that focus on mission and resources, empowering people, and building trust and excellence. So as we go into that, I'll kind of touch on what those all mean. So the first set, focus on mission and resource, right? This is about focusing on what are those big picture goals that you have as a board. What are your core responsibilities as a township board, and allocating the resources to carry those out. So, you know, I don't know what the top things in your strategic plan for the next 5 years are, but, you know, focus on mission and resources. You know, the key point there is, as you're going through your annual budget process, thinking about how do our budget decisions drive us towards that. Yes, the detail in the budget for a lot of things is really important, and as we go through the budget process, it's good to ask those questions and kind of understand, you know, where's our money going? Where's money coming from? Are we being good stewards of those resources? But kind of that big picture decision of, does this budget as a whole move us towards what our goal is as a township board, for who we want to be, for what services we're providing, for do our decisions help our township be the place that we want it to be for our residents. The performance benchmarks and monitoring, again, that's thinking about how do we, throughout the year or throughout the cycle of a strategic plan, you know, what's the information that we're collecting to find out if we're achieving our goals, if we're on track for that. What's an appropriate level of reporting on those things? So if you're asking, you know, Julius to bring a regular report on something that you've allocated resources for, how often is too often? How often is not enough, right? What's that balance? How much information do you all collectively need in order to feel like you can properly evaluate and kind of carry out that oversight? And then that kind of informed policy guiding actions, you know, it sounds like you all do a pretty good job of that. You're thoughtful in kind of your decision-making processes, and thinking through what, you know, individually and collectively, what do we think is the best decision for our community. So I have a slide kind of on each of those that I'm gonna basically kind of skip over, but they each have some discussion questions on there that, and I've sent this to Julius so, you know, he can share it. If there's particular topics that you wanted to come back to at another time, those would be kind of some good questions just to kind of get some conversation going around some of those particular topics. So mission-focused actions and impacts, again, that's focusing on those big picture goals. We use the word mission there, but it really is just those broader long-term goals. And this is actually one note I'll make on this. The mission piece is actually a really, really important piece in terms of staff satisfaction and staff retention. So I'm working on also my doctorate in public administration right now, and a lot of my research is in this area. And there's a study in North Carolina of local government employees, and they found that 80% of staff who clearly understood how their work connected to the mission and goals of their local government said they'd be happy to spend the rest of their career working for that local unit of government. So the more that you all can kind of clearly articulate what that big picture vision is, and then help staff understand, you know, this thing you're doing on a random Tuesday, here's how that connects to that. That's a really, really important piece of kind of the staff side of things. Resources to accomplish mission, I talked on that, on kind of the budget piece, but some questions there that you know you could think about at some point. Benchmarking and monitoring, and the goal really kind of as the image there is to have things moving, you know, aligned with the mission, contributing to that mission, not things pulling in multiple different directions. We want to be avoiding that as much as possible. These are kind of, again, just some questions there that as you think about, you know, if you wanted to think more about, are we, you know, how are we using good policy to guide decisions? You know, what could that look like? So that's actually a question that I'd love to hear. What's something that you do, or if you think, you know, something we could do better to align your discussions with those strategic goals? So as you're, you know, sitting here on a board meeting, you know, your next board meeting or later on when a agenda item comes up, what's something that you can do to kind of have that frame of mind of how does this connect to our big picture goals as a community and as a board?
Communicate better.
Okay, communicate better.
I think one thing we do is be prepared. I think the reality is that one thing Julius does exceptionally well is he is incredibly detailed with information he gives to us when we have a topic coming up of need, of issue that's going to be a discussion. We're not walking into these things blind. And I think we spend the time looking at what he's put together. A lot of these things from property acquisitions and different things like that, they're ones that could have gone different ways based upon, you know, personal desires. But I think when Julius comes in and really can help provide real strong background information, not biased, not decision driven, but really saying, here are the topics, here are the ideas, here's what you have to think about.
Facts.
It allows us to come in really and get right to the meat of the issue as opposed to ancillary discussions that never seem to allow us to get there. And I think that's a strong thing that's really continues to grow. When I get something from Julius, I take it very seriously in the sense of what am I going to learn from this? And I think that's important. So more of those kind of prep work ahead of time allows us.
And the
He
prep
wants more
work
homework.
is also backed in many cases by a smaller board of individuals. It's not the trail committee, it's not Julius, it's the trail committee, or it's the parks, and I think that's really important.
And Julius is incredibly accessible to that when we have a question about something that comes out to say, hey, let me understand where this is coming from before I walk in a meeting and make sure I understand where we're at with these things. But I think we have a lot of good groups but Julius tends to pull it together.
I think one of the things too, and Bob touched on this, is and this is something I've learned over time too. It's interesting because it's the only community I've ever worked in that we've had as many committees as we do. And at first I didn't like the committees. Now I do like the committees because it allows me an opportunity to vet it further and allows us to have a more nuanced conversation behind the scenes to try to identify what are the sticking points for board members. What are the questions I'm missing? What are the things that we need to be able to answer before it comes to the board for that whole discussion? And so I appreciate the opportunity, and we've used those for a number of different things, whether it's admin committee, BGU, finance committee. So I think those are extremely helpful and an important part of the process.
I love having the committee. I think that having committees is a key component to achieving ultimate goals. And I do coffee clutches frequently with residents, and this is something that most people don't realize is part of our structure. And when it's explained to them, they're like, oh, wow. I mean, it does make sense. That gives that gives each of the committee members an opportunity to, put their thoughts all on the table. You think this way, I think that way, let's come to an agreement. And then we move forward and bring whatever the issues we have to the board. So it's like the due diligence is done first, and then it's brought to the board, which, I think that's a great way to go about it.
Yeah, it sounds like that supports good decision-making process.
I think for me, I look at strategic goals. Some of the board members weren't here when we did a strategic plan. I usually bring a binder in that has our strategic goals laid out, and just, everybody sees them. It's always just a constant reminder, okay, these are the things that we have strategically agreed are the most important things to Ada Township. And I look over there and we see MTA and we're certified and we do this. It'd probably be nice to have maybe those goals as a reminder somewhere, so we can look at it. And again, I'm staring at MTA. I go like, so it's a reminder that it's all about governance, good governance, following statutory laws, and all the things that we're talking about. So, for what it's worth.
Yeah. Anyone else on this one? All right, so the next set then is empower people, and that's that, constructive partnership between the board and staff with kind of clearly defined roles. The board as a body, right, with a thoughtful kind of intentional plan to govern together. We've talked about that a little bit today, and I'll go a couple of these into a little bit more detail. Great meetings, again, how do you, this is again something that's kind of come up, is how do you have good meetings where you feel like, okay, that was productive, that was effective, that was efficient, we made the decisions, we didn't get too lost in the weeds. And then that responsible partnership with stakeholders, especially those your residents, right? How are you connecting with them? How are you being responsive to their needs? So that constructive partnership, right? That's really that. How do we work together with, between the board and the day to day? It sounds like in a lot of ways that's working quite well here in terms of balancing that. And the clearly defined roles thing there, I think, is an important thing in terms of just continuing to be thoughtful about everyone having a shared understanding of what roles are, whether that's roles on the board, interactions with staff, department heads, thinking about how do we continue to operate in a way that makes sense and, again, kind of respects both boundaries that exist or don't exist in state law, but then also just having that conversation as a group to say what's the most effective way that we can do this together, I think is a big piece of that. In a lot of places we kind of talk about this of like one of the most important decisions that a board makes is who you're hiring as your manager, your administrator, and then obviously in township government, again, because the treasurer and clerk are members of the board, them being elected to those roles and then figuring out that kind of partnership is a really important piece of being an effective board. Just some practices we've seen that support those kind of constructive partnerships across the state. Communicating early and often, right? Just making sure that people are kind of on the same page in terms of issues. Making sure that channels of communication are open so that if there's an issue that needs to come to a board discussion and get on an agenda, that's happening, as early as possible and not waiting until, the middle of a meeting to bring up a new topic, those kinds of things. Getting to know each other, getting to know, a little bit, I think that just helps, right? The more you get to know a person, you get to know what motivates them, what's important to them. I know I have some colleagues I can say, hey, this thing is changing and we're doing this and it's okay, fine. Some I know I need to come prepared with a lot more detail of like what the rationale for the decision was, and just kind of understand working, relationships there. Being willing to address concerns directly, building those boundaries, defining those roles, again, are I think things that we've kind of have come up as we've been going through our conversation today. these are more, I think, problems that we tend to see when there are boards that are doing a little bit of the micromanaging, getting in the way of the administrator or manager's role, that can cause some of that dysfunction that we've seen across the state, overstepping boundaries, pursuing personal agenda above and beyond kind of that board as one body, disengagement or being unprepared. I loved hearing, that you all mostly sounds like come prepared to engage, making assumptions rather than communicating, and then that micromanagement piece that I mentioned earlier. I'll skip over that one for now. This one I wanted to touch on a little bit, but the board as a body, a thoughtful, intentional plan to govern together. And I think this is where, as we were talking earlier and hearing some of the, where there's maybe some, whether tension or kind of disagreement of how things come to the board or what the level of involvement is, I think having some of that conversation of thinking through what actually is the appropriate level in terms of, board involvement in day-to-day and the information that's coming and what those conversations and issues look like. I think that's a really important piece of being on the same page, right? Having that plan of how do we all work together as a board and taking the time to have that conversation. I saw over here the kind of principles of governance on the wall, and I don't see that in every place that I go, and so seeing that was encouraging. And then a lot of boards have kind of a formal plan. It's not bylaws necessarily, but it's something that a board maybe at the start of a term or when they decide, hey, this is needed, may come up with to say, this is how we are understanding our roles, responsibilities, and how we want to work together. Typically has that kind of roles and reporting structures, kind of how information may be communicated, requested, shared. I know in some communities, members may share information kind of just with each other. In some places I've seen it where communication kind of all goes, that's for the board, all goes to the manager and then out. Just different channels of that, and kind of figuring out for you all together, what is it that actually makes the most sense? What's going to filter the right amount of information and the appropriate level of engagement? Speaking with one voice after decisions, that's often a really big challenge, especially when you maybe really disagreed with a decision that's made, but being able to then afterwards say, okay, this is a decision that our board has made, and so how do I support this being carried out effectively in our township, even if it wasn't the thing that I really supported. And then building trust and really just trying to work through those disagreements, right? How do you state your disagreement with an issue, do that obviously, in a respectful way, and advocate for the things we believe in, and then, like we said earlier, know that, tomorrow we have to work together. Our next meeting we might be working on something we both care about and agree on. Really trying to build those shared expectations and that shared accountability. The shared accountability piece, I think, is one of the hardest things that I see in local government with local boards, because there is not a lot of, in most cases, really any formal accountability right? If someone is, acting out in a way that's not breaking any actual rules, there's not a lot of actual formal accountability. And so it's that shared commitment to holding each other accountable to that and yourselves accountable to that, I think is really important. And then the last bullet point I think is an important one, that it doesn't guarantee success. It requires individual and collective commitment. And my example of this is the MSU Board of Trustees. A couple years ago when President Guskowitz came, he and the Board of Trustees signed a set of governing commitments. They said, these are how we are going to work together. These are things we're going to do. These are things we're not going to do. It was one of his conditions of coming because the board had previously been dysfunctional. And obviously, he's now leaving because the board didn't, in his eyes, live up to their commitments. And so I just say that to say, it's an ongoing commitment, right? It's not a commitment we make once. It's something that we have to continue to work on. You may have a conversation and say, okay, we think that this is going to work really well in terms of flow of information, right? And then as you go, you learn, oh, this would, we need to make some changes here or there. I think that's kind of just one of those, it's ongoing commitment, ongoing work to improving the way that we work together. So great meetings is another, a key piece of it. And I think the meeting piece is really just having that cadence of what is the process, right? You have the agenda, do you have enough information to make decisions related to what's on the agenda? What happens when someone wants to bring something up that's not directly related to something on the agenda? How do you stay on track in your meetings? What is related to on the agenda and what's considered not? I think figuring some of those things out too is an important piece. And we always, that you make a motion so that then your focus, your discussion on what the motion at hand is a really important piece of that. And that's kind of why parliamentary procedure works the way it does, so that we do stay focused on what's the agenda item, what's the motion that's being made related to that. Responsive partnership with your community, we've talked about that, and you all kind of talked about the importance there already of being engaged, hearing from residents and people in your community. So this another question I'll throw out. What are some things that help you work through differences and then maintain that commitment to your board, right? You're all here. You've had disagreements at various times. None of you have walked away and said, I'm done with this. So what are things that help you all continue to work through things? When you have a disagreement in a meeting and then okay, there's, I'm still gonna have to work with someone. There's gonna be things that we agree on and have to work together on. What are some things that help with that?
I think, as I believe Treasurer Moran already depicted, we're all very dedicated to the community itself. So that I would like to think that that's the priority for all of us. Mm-hmm. It's bigger than us. It's all about our community.
Yeah, and I've heard that, I think, from everyone here today.
I think that I've tried to be tolerant and empathetic of board members' needs to communicate the way they like to communicate and in a style that they like to communicate, and recognize that every human being has lived on a journey of life that's all unique and different to one another, and that because of just our age and our experiences, that the best outcome comes when you do have the patience to allow people to express themselves fully. And so, and it may takes a meeting longer, and a lot of times, in your own mind, you may say, I've already made up my mind on this, and now we're just talking. But I think it's still important to allow that to happen. And anyway, I think that's one of the things that I do personally to try to work through our board meetings successfully.
Well, I'll say something, because I wrote down some notes here. I mean, because you referenced, we leave sometimes and we talk about, man, that was a really good, productive meeting, and then there's other meetings that you're like, what the hell just happened? So I think a lot of it is, I know Tom is empathetic and I appreciate that aspect of it, but really some of these differences get in the way of a productive meeting. I think we get kind of, I don't even know how to explain how it happens. I think we're quick to judge in some instances, and instead of just judging, just kind of listening and hoping that, okay, all right, we're new, we have some new board members, whatever, it'll get better. How can we coach them? How can we maybe improve? Maybe I can meet with those individuals who are there airing differences, or what, trying to understand what is the issue, because for me, I think there's just such an eloquence to a board meeting, and especially here in Ada, that I try and uphold the standard that I've learned. And then that's not to air dirty laundry or differences. It's really to address the issues that are on the agenda, take the personnel aspect out of it, at least at the board level, at our board meetings, and then try to coalesce later to discuss those differences, or why did you say that, or whatever happened. That has just been prevalent probably more in the last year than I ever remember. And again, there's just a certain amount of decorum. I mean, we talk about like public comment. I remember when somebody would come up and have a public comment, that was it. It was silence. It was an awkward silence. And so, and sometimes I just think that, okay, that just needs to be directed. If it's a treasurer issue or a trustee issue, then that be directed. Like, we'll have the treasurer get a hold of you, we'll get in touch with you, versus, what I feel is just becomes a bigger disagreement. So I'd like to avoid those meetings where I walk away feeling like, what the hell just happened, frankly? And I don't know, I guess I toss it back to you. I mean, is that common? Is that healthy? I mean, I go to a lot of seminar conferences, and, for a while, a board can be dysfunctional and be mad at each other, but that can only last for so long, and then we have to get the work done. And we have to agree on certain things. So I'm not sure what helps me, other than I'm a pretty optimistic guy and things always get better.
Yeah, one of the things I think about when, and this applies whether it's a public meeting or a meeting we're having at work, is if things don't go the way we want them to, is trying to reflect and think, okay, was that a personal problem, right? Someone or multiple people said things that they shouldn't have said. They didn't live up to kind of their commitment to the group. Was it a process problem, right? Is there something in our decision-making process or our agreement of how we're going to work together that needs to be addressed to correct that, or something else? And that's not, right here today, that doesn't give you the answer. But I think those kinds of questions can help kind of think about what's the thing that, if a meeting, or if there's a pattern of meetings not going the way you want them to, what's the thing that needs to change? Is it individuals saying, okay, I'm gonna try and approach things differently? Or is it collectively having a conversation of, okay, this piece of the process isn't quite working. How do we want to change that collectively to make it work better, to reduce the chances that a meeting, goes in a direction you don't want it to, or that you leave feeling like, man, we spent way too much time on this thing that, for whatever reason, and not enough time on things that are important. And I think, kind of back to the getting to know each other and the way that you process things and the way that you make decisions, understanding, and again, there's always balance, but understanding what's the level of information and kind of processing that different people want and need before they're comfortable going ahead with the decision. Some of us are really quick to, okay, I saw the thing, I processed the information, let's go. And some of us want to process and get more of those questions answered. And I think figuring out a balance of how much of that has to happen in public meeting, because obviously if you're deliberating, if you're deliberating toward a decision as a board, Open Meetings Act says you have to do that here. But are there questions that you could ask ahead of time for your own sake to get some of those questions answered? Is every question one that the whole board needs to hear the answer to, or is that I'm curious about this, but maybe nobody else cares, and so I can ask the manager or whoever's department is responsible? There's not a standard answer to that. I think that's something that it sounds like maybe some conversation of, like, how do we balance that? What processes could help with that might be.
Better communication. I'm trying to choose my words carefully here because I don't want to dredge up things, but I mean, okay, so we get our board packets usually Thursday, sometimes even on Wednesday. So it's plenty of time for the board members to review them. They're online, plus we get a physical packet. I have taken things personally, things like I'm called out at a board level, at the board meeting, for a typo in the board, in its assembly or whatnot. And I say to myself, and I've even said this openly, that's a communication issue right there. You saw it, you read it. Can you send me an email? Can you pick up the phone and call me? Why do you have to grandstand and be at the, you know what I'm saying? I mean, to me, that's low. So I focus on communication. I think that just about anything could be solved with better communication. There's been several issues that I've encountered that simple communication would remedy, and it would make me feel a little less salty sometimes. So there, I said it.
And I think the board conversation there is just being clear on what the appropriate level of communication, channels for communication, right, at board meeting, outside of board meeting. I think just being willing to have that conversation and say, how do we want that communication to go? Whatever, if there's other sticking points, being willing to address those things and say, okay, we don't want this to not go well here. I mean, there's not a lot of audience as has been referenced, but right, what do you want your meetings to look like for people who are here and for the community to kind of see that representation of township government?
A couple of things about, I was frankly very surprised and have been continue to be surprised at the sheer amount of volume on our agendas and the number of really significant issues that we as a community have to decide upon at our meetings. And I'm not sure, you've been on the board a long time, and you also, Dan, have been on the board a long time. And Kevin, as you as well. But the point I'm making is that, I mean, are things a lot heavier in the last couple of years? Or
we're a busy community, but really what has to, and it goes all the way back to his comment, when does a meeting turn sideways? When do we all walk out of here shaking our heads? It's when we take our eye off the focus and put it to ourselves, or we get it to a topic that's not on the agenda, that's not for the discussion, it's not for the specific comments that need to take place. That is when every meeting has gone sideways. When somebody has an attitude or presents an idea that's not on the agenda, that's when all of a sudden we're all kind of just, what? Where did this come from?
Well, that's what the point I was trying to make when I was asking about the breadth of our agendas is that the meetings are at night. The goal, I think, is to keep them under 2 hours.
There's been times that they've been 3-4 hours.
No, I know, but
it's not the length. It's sticking to the facts of the agenda that we need to be studying and making decisions on.
Right. Well,
that's what we prepare for. Correct? I mean, really?
Correct. But that's what I was trying to say is that if we have, as we gain more and more experience and empathy and recognition, we have a lot of things to talk about tonight. Let's stay focused. Let's stay on track. And I think that myself, I'm doing a better job of moving through the more administrative parts of our agenda efficiently. And that took a little bit of time to get used to that too. But I think that if we all focus on staying on track with our agenda, the meetings can't help but go more smoothly because we're focusing on exactly what decisions we're supposed to be making. That's all.
And kids, I just had surgery on Friday, so I need pills. I gotta go. I'm sorry.
Okay, no worries. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your ability to
thank
come
you.
today, Bob.
So just a couple more things for me. This is kind of our last, the last section in the components, and I think we've been kind of covering these things, but that building trust and excellence, really just that culture of accountability, transparency, integrity, right? How do we work together? Forward thinking excellence. It's, you referenced earlier that financially you all are in a good place in terms of budget, which makes that a little bit easier. But it's always tough in budget conversations or really any issue to think both short and long term. But I think that's in local government a really important thing to be able to do is think, okay, how does this decision that we're making tonight affect our community now and in the next year? But also, what does that set us up for 10, 20, 30 years from now? And are we keeping on a trajectory that we want to be on? So those are kind of the last two there. And, these are just kind of some of those questions around that as well. But encouraging everyone to apply those principles in decisions that builds trust in the process, in each other. Again, to where you can trust that even if someone disagrees with you or is supporting a position you don't like, you trust that they were thoughtful about their decision and how they got to that point. That makes it easier to work through those discussions and to continue working together.
So what if that scenario doesn't exist? I mean, somebody just instantly dismisses the thought, period. Doesn't appreciate maybe the time or the effort or the thought, it just gets quickly diminished. I mean, this board it's good, okay?
Mm-hmm.
We have a few issues here, and I think a lot of it pertains to, I think the comment that stood out to me is motion on the table, not yourself. Again, I think I always liked check your egos at the door. Just come in here, and again, some things are brought up and maybe they're unintentional and it's said in a way that hurts somebody and their feelings get hurt, but I don't think that was really the case. So, sensitivity I think is high these days in our board meetings, and I think it's just important that we just keep our eye on a ball. And with communication, I can be a better communicator. I mean, sometimes I get an email and I may not respond to it for a couple days later. We all have busy lives. I just wouldn't hold that over somebody's head. I would just go like, okay, they're busy, whatever. I just feel that we have to move on. There's just too much, I don't know, noise, I guess, that is really interfering. And again, I think that's kind of what we're hoping to, how to address. I mean, we can talk about accountability and transparency and putting stuff on, but we're all professionals here. I mean, I think we just have to know that we're all professionals. We all bring something different to the table, which is really what I appreciate being a part of this board. Something doesn't have to be said at all, but when I know somebody says something, my ears perk up even more, especially if they don't say as much in a board meeting. So I don't know. It's just, what's a good board? When you see it. I mean, we can look outside. The accomplishments are all over the place, from staff to whatever. I just think we just have a few rough edges and I'm just not sure how to address that, or if it's just commonplace amongst all boards. That's mine, and I don't want to speak for Bob, but I just focus on the task at hand, and if it's something that you've taken personally, then you're going to have to address it with that particular individual, and if that individual doesn't feel like addressing it, then shame on that individual, and then you move on. I mean, again, maybe I have thicker skin than most people, but I would just like us to keep our eye on the prize, especially these board meetings, so they don't go, because we do have a lot of content in our board meetings. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're down to one a month, and I've never been a proponent of that, but we have them, and I get through them. Yeah. So there's a way, and I'm not sure if there's something, or it's just us. And again, maybe it's in your presentation, but I just feel that we're close. We do things really, really well 95% of the time. 5% of the time we just get sideways. So, that could be normal. I'll say no more because it's just not my.
I've been sitting here and I feel like this meeting has been a microcosm of some of our board meetings where
there's a little tension.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I thought about, because I'll be honest, I know staff's seeing this too. I mean, we want a good board. We want a high functioning board. We don't want a board that turns into Cascade or turns into somewhere else. And I don't think we're there at all. I mean, I think to Kevin's point, I agree. We're doing great things. When we bring stuff, the board takes it. We've done real estate transactions. We've done big projects. We've done big things. But I think the one thing is, and I try to preach this with staff too, is we can't control everything, but we can control our reactions.
Yep.
And I think sometimes the reactions to certain things at the board meetings are more so than the actual activity or whatever happened. And then it kind of creates a domino effect of reaction, and then it's sideways. Is just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and to your question, I think it's very normal, right? There are not boards that don't ever disagree or have meetings go, not the way they want to. I think the challenging thing across all boards that I work with is there's no policy you can adopt, no document you can adopt, right, that fixes it, because your accountability is together to each other and to the process. So it's a matter of, the governing commitments example is part of it, where you could formally outline, okay, here's some things that, you could talk about, here's some things that are not working, and put together a set of formal statements of, like, here's how we want to do this better. And you could adopt that, but it still means every meeting, every interaction, that you all have to choose to show up in that way. And that's hard, right? Especially when there are issues that, you have different perspectives, different ways of wanting to do things, different opinions. But I think that's where the value in those conversations are. And, you asked kind of about, like, what about if there's, an individual who isn't interested in doing that? There's not a lot, right? You can set the expectations, again, together, because that's where your authority is, and say, this is how we want to be together, and then make the space for that and hope that people are willing to work with you. And what I have heard today is that, yes, there are disagreements, yes, there may be tension in some areas, but at the end of the day, you do a good job of working together to make good decisions for your community. And so to me, that's a good kind of common ground of, if we want to continue to make good decisions for our community, let's figure out how we work through some of the sticking points.
And maybe it's just a byproduct of where we are. It's been a journey from a sleepy little village to what we have today. So, and with that comes, differing personalities, stronger personalities. So I'm sure it's not a silver bullet that addresses all these things. And I guess if we all understand what you've laid out in front of us, and we all make a decision to be better, I think most of our issues are resolved.
Yeah, and I think like we said, like, continuing to have the conversations and being willing to name when issues in terms of process, contribute to that. How can we change the process so that we don't run into the situations that lead you off track or lead you into conflict, as much as possible, I think is a good practice. Just kind of that reflection individually and collectively, on where things can be better. So this is just kind of a summary here on, most effective boards, clear on role and boundaries, and I think that's an individual and a collective kind of clarity, that focus on mission and resources, that collaboration, and then transparency. And this is a question I like to leave people with, not that you need to answer out loud, but whether you kind of just think about that, is thinking about what's something that you can do as an individual to strengthen the effectiveness of the board, right? What's something that if you were a little bit extra patient with someone who may irk you at times, or if you did some, one thing a little bit differently, that could strengthen. So that's just something I encourage, just reflect on, think about, as you continue to work together. Yeah.
That's an excellent question to end with.
Yeah, thanks.
Exactly.
But yeah, any other questions?
Can you put that back, slide back up? So we don't
Yeah, I like that.
And I can share the presentation as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
'Cause I-
Yeah, that'd be great, thank you, appreciate that.
And then
Yeah.
in the future, I mean, if we identify additional training that we want, we could, reach out to
Yep.
Eric and see if there's something that works, or, always choose another opportunity too.
Yeah. But yeah, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
Go green.
Go white.
You know why Julius is so good at what he does, though? Grand Valley taught him all this stuff.
There you go.
Go Spartans.
There's probably a lot of truth to that. I mean, I don't think that's a remark that should be dismissed. It's an institution and chose to go there.
Being true to our schools.
Made
That's
the
all.
best of it, so.
I wasn't cheering at school, I was just saying this, bringing up the fact that, he's got blue on, it's perfect.
It's a wonderful
you go.
university.
Joe, if we get
It's a
five,
wonderful university.
if you get number 5 on the laptop files, just so it brings our agenda back up.
There we go. All right, so we ready to move on to our next item then? Do the discuss residential architecture standards in PDM overlay district. I'll just do a fast intro and then I'll hand it off to Julius and planning department. I guess privately, I've just kind of tried to fast track this conversation because there's so much activity with respect to residential happening and a lot of tear downs and redevelopment going on that I just kind of realized that through all my years being involved in the evolution of the planning of the village area that we really don't have any, we've had no conversations since about 2015 about what is our expectations of the residential areas in the context of what our master plan says. Our master plan references the character of the residential in relation to the village itself in a number of places, and that we, as a community, spend a huge amount of time focusing in on that with respect to the commercial redevelopment and build. And so we got together with the planning commission chairman, as well as the planning department, and Julius and I, to kind of just try to formulate a conversation that we could have with the Board of Trustees about this topic. And so this is the outgrowth of that. And I think the only reason it's really on this meeting as opposed to a normal meeting is that we could have a few minutes more time. And I'm just concerned about the number of open lots and what could happen if we, as Bob put it last time, the horse is already loose from the barn, so to speak. But that doesn't mean there's a lot more horses that we should be concerned about. So with that, I'll usually.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the pieces, we wanted to bring it to the work session. This is kind of the impetus for the 5th Monday work sessions, was an opportunity to look at something in a little bit different structure, not necessarily needing a vote on it, but trying to get feedback. And then if there was a desire and the board today said, yes, this is something that we're interested in, then we could take that, John could take that to the planning commission and say, this is a component that the board has brought up and would like evaluated as part of the zoning ordinance rewrite and update. And I know John's got some thoughts on potential language, and we've talked about it in his memo, some standards we looked at. And the idea, I think to Tom's point, was not to say here's 5 houses, this is all you can build, but instead say, how does this tie into the historical characteristics, even though we don't have a historic district, of the downtown? I mean, do we want a glass house next to Township Hall? Do we want, who knows what could be built? And if the board says we do, then that's okay. I mean, realistically, that's why we're here, is to say, this is something that right now is identified as a gap in our ordinance. We take great care to worry about the commercial architectural standards, and we don't give any care to the residential architectural standards. And this would allow us to alleviate that. So happy to answer questions, or Director Said is available as well. Yeah, John, come on up.
Yeah, thanks, Tom and Julius. John Said, Director of Planning. So yeah, just maybe to amplify on the context a little bit, This topic had been identified. As Julius and Tom had mentioned, yes, we have architectural standards for non-residential or non-single-family properties in the PVM district currently. And the idea was, does it make some sense to also have architectural standards that apply for single-family residential homes, especially in the downtown area? We are undergoing a zoning ordinance 3 right now, as you all know, and as we've got a meeting coming up in August to kind of talk about some of the conclusionary type issues associated with the zoning ordinance, as a lot of that's already been prepared. That does not mean that something of this nature could not be added, but it's also something that could be done separately as a follow-on. It doesn't have to be part of the current zoning ordinance rewrite. It could follow immediately after, or whatever the case may be. Ultimately, though, a couple of things to keep in mind is that the residential area is in this particular part of the community, and I think I put some of that in the staff report, and certainly, Julius, I did provide a couple of slides on it if it makes any sense to show those, just for context. But we currently have the VR Village Residential District, which is kind of Bronson Street, portion of Fay Street, and that's expected, and I think Thornhill Boulevard Drive as well. That's expected to expand slightly to include all of those areas and to bring in those design standards, or I should say those zoning elements for single-family homes. There has already been a lot done with single-family zoning in the VR district. You all might remember, in fact, there's even a kind of a chart that I think I had provided to Julius and we may have available. The current VR standards versus the current PVM standards. Front yard setbacks, side yard setbacks are front yard setbacks are identical, side yard setbacks are very similar. Rear yard setbacks are a little bit different. But lot area, lot width, a lot of those things are very similar between PVM and VR. So the idea being that, you know, having some of those spatial development standards does help control, but it doesn't do everything. It doesn't impact design, right? So you could have different kinds of designs. You could have a prairie-style home next to a cube, a glass cube, like Julius mentioned. They all might meet the setback standards, but they all have very different design concepts to them. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing is in the staff report, I did identify a couple of things that have been identified as to building form topics or guidelines that Suzanne Schultz has put into the zoning ordinance that could be utilized. But are there other elements that you would all like to see, similar to what's in the PVM now for commercial buildings, exterior building materials, you know, use of windows, those kinds of things? Those may be a little more restrictive than you'd want to get to, you know, windows and things of that nature, but are there other elements, home design types or exterior building materials and so forth, that you would want to have included as part of the conversation? Ultimately, though, obviously, what we would like to get is clarity on a direction from the board, if this is a direction you want to move into. So, Brent, can you think of anything else? Or Julius? So I just wanted to provide some additional comments on that, and I'll just kind of sit down and listen. Thanks.
Before you go, can you just explain a little bit between, I guess if I'm hearing changing the ordinance to include some sort of architectural requirement versus a follow-on, can you speak to that a little bit? I guess I'm not.
Yeah.
What's the difference administratively, so on and so forth?
Sure. So ultimately, we would actually request guidance on that from the Township Board, because there are maybe different levels of review or different levels of a potential residential review process that could be put into place. It could be building materials. It could be architectural styles. You know, a number of those kinds of different things. And when I say architectural styles.
What world would you rather live in, I guess? I mean, this is, I'm trying to make your life easier. I mean,
sure.
I like some sort of, I think, bumpers to kind of make sure we don't have a glass house in Ada, but as I mentioned when we got together as an admin committee, I want to make sure Visser's house there at the end gets built, because it's a beautiful house and so I don't know how we get there, but it'd be nice to have some sort of safeguards, but I don't want it to be an administrative nightmare. I don't want to be making that decision as a board member, so we're basically throwing it in your lap, so
Right.
you need to tell me what administratively allows you to follow the guidelines as effectively and efficiently as possible without making it an administrative nightmare.
It's a great question. To be brutally honest, I think that there are a lot of things that could happen that might make it challenging for us administratively to administer a program of residential design review. And I don't mean that with any disrespect to anybody on the board that may say, yeah, we should have some architectural guidelines. In the commercial environment, they have worked. The residential setting, obviously, the dynamic, I think, is a little different, Kevin, as you might guess, right? Because people say, this is my home. I want to do this. I want a home that looks like this or this or this or this. And people have individual tastes. We have the development community as well, that everybody may have different ideas as to what their standards are. And so, having not worked in a community that has residential design standards, but at the same time still has very stringent zoning controls, I find the zoning controls to be very, very helpful for us to guide things. At the same time, I understand fully that people have some concerns and difficulties with some of the residential development that's gone on, right? We've had some development down Bronson, which has kind of raised the ire of people, where people have said,
Well, it has, but then it's kind of dissipated a little bit. I mean, we have a resident who built a home that was controversial at the time, and now he's, I think, on the DDA board. So
that's correct.
I think for me, and again, I think we had this discussion in our admin, when you start talking about design, I think a lot of these issues could be resolved when you start talking about looking at setbacks, because I think just the largesse of some of these homes is what catches us off guard. But at the end of the day, if they're all large houses at the end of the day, it all blends in together and it works. So, and again, I think my concern, especially with the house that is going to be built, I think could have been alleviated if we had a little bit more guidance when it comes to requesting a variance and setbacks in there. Because again, I think just because it was there, we say, okay, yeah, go ahead and do it, when it's two different things. We're talking about an outbuilding versus one huge building. So for me, again, first and foremost, I'd love to have it, but I think it becomes somewhat administratively difficult, perhaps, to say what's good and what's bad. I don't know. Obviously, further discussion, we have a board member here that sits on the planning commission, and I'd certainly like to hear his viewpoints as well on the topic, but this could be the first of a few meetings to get to where we need to get to, in my mind, if it's going to happen at all.
John, our guidelines are important, I think, but I guess the question that rolls around in my head is how restrictive is the intention? Is it we only want this kind of house built within this area and only that house? I mean, that might set a few people off.
Absolutely, and actually,
Yeah.
in my view, that's kind of one of the key topics for conversation.
I get, and
by
again,
the
I mean, I
board.
certainly understand you want a certain style, but again, I just wonder how far does that go?
Right.
How restrictive does it get?
It's a great question, which I don't have the answer to. I mean, honestly, we're seeking because this was brought to us. We're seeking that kind of guidance from you all as the setters of
Yeah.
township policy. And to your point, we all have different ideas of what's in good taste.
Absolutely.
Right. We
Right.
have some new homes that a lot of people feel are great, but other people feel are not. Individual homeowners like and dislike some designs, some
And
things.
then when you talk about the builders themselves, I mean,
Correct.
their builders, I think, are very on top of what style, what's on the way out, what's on the way in.
Right.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing that I want to try to focus us back on. Ada prided itself on trying to build a framework of historic significance so that we remained relevant and that we had a sense of depth to our community. And that one of the exercises of the Township Hall was to stay within this vernacular that we have codified for the commercial district. And so we enlisted, Notre Dame for that very purpose, and we use Ken Dixon constantly for all these buildings. So yeah, I think one of the reasons we want the guidelines is not to say that suddenly gabled roofs with porches is no longer in, and flat roofs that are steel structures with glasses is tomorrow's flavor, so that's what should be built here. I personally think that listening to the comments and the like, that a guidebook like this Franklin has, which I see some of the stuff that we would develop for ourselves, is similar to something that homeowners associations use in developments all over the country for custom homes to be built within the confines of homeowners association defined subdivisions. We have a master plan that defines that vernacular already with respect to the village area. And so that to then have a design book that, along with the other things, that gives visual evidence to an architect who's going to build a house in town, should give them the roadmap to design a home that they think is going to be approved, and that we should let the Planning Commission just see the renderings in relation to the guidebook, be our representatives for the community, and say, vote it up or down. And if they have a problem with this or that part about it, you would send the architect back to say, don't front load that garage, side load that garage, or whatever. There may be an appeals process too, so that if we want, and Julius, correct me, or we talk to the attorney whether or not, let's say that they don't like the decision. I mean, I guess they could go to the Board of Appeals, but the Board of Appeals traditionally is focused on undue hardship and the like. Is there an appeals process where they could appeal to us, meaning the Township Board, to be a second set of eyes, again, using our guidebook to say, well, no, we agree with what the Planning Commission voted on it.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, the board could set it up any way they want in terms of ordinance. I think when we had talked a little bit about it, and obviously this is a big decision for the board in terms of would the onus be on the staff to make the interpretation or the Planning Commission? To me, it would make more sense to have it on the staff than Planning Commission, similar to any other zoning interpretation of the ordinance. And then you could set up in there that any appeal would be to the Township Board, essentially. There's a lot of different options.
The reason that I have a problem with the planning department making the decision is the very things that John's already said. John, as an administrator, really would like to have a guidebook that says window sizes and should it have a porch or not, and the roof pitch and the setback and the this and the that, and they're able to go down this checklist, no different than all of our PVM applications for that have been presented to us, where they list the variances and the deviations. And the Planning Commission is empowered to look at those variations, right, and yay them or nay them as a voting body. Unless that level of design toolbook is designed, I think it would be hard and probably not defensible. I mean, again, we could talk to the attorneys about that for it to be applied. And the only reason I thought that maybe the Planning Commission looking at it would perhaps lower the risk that the applicant would not like the decision And that decision would then have to come to the board, as you suggested, maybe. Because I don't get a sense that this board wants to be in that business. That's why we have a planning commission, that's why we have a planning department.
But I guess my concern here is that I don't disagree with some of the parts you say, but the parts that get me are, you say a guidebook, but when does that become a rule book? And where's that delicate balance between the two?
Well, that's the reason that I kept saying the planning commission making a decision is that this is a touchy-feely decision, and if collectively 7 members of a planning commission all agree on one direction on it, that's probably a good indicator that the broader community would agree with that.
I disagree with that, because I've been on the issue of planning commissions on other stuff I built, and it becomes this, everything's allowed, and a couple say, well, I don't like it, and I don't want to do this, and it becomes a grandstanding side of
Well,
other issues.
who's grandstanding?
The planning commission was, not in Grand Rapids Township. What else?
You mean a planning commission member or the planning commission collectively?
Member, and it kind of riled everyone up into the sense of these, how, these things were, it eventually went through, but it
So you're throwing the planning commission members in harm's way because we are making it personal. In essence, this is the very same thing we were just talking about. We leave your what was your ego at the table or whatever.
Right, but then the same issue when someone says, well, I want a side-load garage versus a front load, and it becomes a sense of, well, that's what I want, and I want this, and it becomes, I just want to be careful that it's, I happen, look, I've lived in a traditional colonial, I live in an ultra-modern glass house, and now I live in a prairie-style house. And so to me, it's the sense of I can bounce between. I happen to like the idea of modern things. I love what Jeff Visser did over there. Would that technically fit within what someone would want to build down here? Or would that technically be out of character?
Well, that's exactly the house and a point, and then that's the slippery slope that we go down. So it doesn't have any architectural, historical, in my mind, but I love the house.
I'd move there in about 0.2 of a second.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's my sense of.
But do I want a solid glass house? No, I don't. So we're talking extremes here that, we've been here a year, and Ada has developed organically, for the most part, at least with the residential homes, and we've done a pretty good job. So unless you can, and I don't know how you do it to where no glass houses.
But what is but I understand, but what is the offense if somebody wants to live in a glass house?
I don't have any issue with it.
Right, but just because we say we want to have a different tradition, then my attitude is we figure out bond the hell out of it, and we buy every piece of property and say, if you want to buy this lot from us in the future, you have to live by these rules. Because the difference in doing a PUD or doing a development that says like Seaside, Florida or something, you've entered in this agreement saying that you want to live here.
But I think we have the right as a community to convey that because of our master plan and the sense of community identity, history, and substance of Ada that we're trying to protect, even though it's changing dynamically in a very modern world. But overwhelmingly, our master plan, take the time to read the master plan. The master plan overwhelmingly says it likes a cute, small-town, historic village of 19th century buildings and residences. That language is in it. And so that's what we approved in 2023. And so in other words, I guess what I'm trying to say is if we're going to do another iteration, say, of the master plan, do all of the public comments and all that, and we want to throw all that language out, then I totally support what you're saying. But right now, based on what our master plan says, my sentiment is that we have a responsibility to try to protect that ethos.
So what happened to the library then? Does the library feel that now today?
No, it doesn't. And had I been on the planning commission during that time, I would have pushed back hard.
Okay, that's fine then, good. I like hearing that, so.
John, what do you think? Again, my question is how restrictive would this be? And I hear guidelines, I hear and it is a gray area at some point. One body is going to have to make a decision.
So what would you like us to do? I guess with all this back and forth, how would you like to try to approach it?
Well, again, and this is something maybe Julius and I can talk about further. Ultimately, whatever is decided by the board, we just want to have some clarity, whatever that might be. If it's only guidelines though, and if it's just suggestions, I think there are enough builders, architects, designers out there that will say, thanks, but no thanks. We're just gonna do what we wanna do. Because homes are a powerful method, if you will, of self-expression, right?
It's a personal thing.
It's a personal thing for a lot of people. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's a fact. We see that a lot. People's, for better or worse, their egos, their whatever, are tied up in their homes. And we see that, obviously. So that's a challenging thing. It really is for us. If we're only going to have guidelines, I think that there are probably a lot of people out there that are going to say, again, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. We're just going to do what we want to do anyway. However, if it is made into rules, whatever those might be, if it's building materials, if it's home design types, if it's those kinds of things, and if those are made into rules, and if they are legally defensible, then that obviously provides more control, but it also provides more clarity.
So what happens then if we come up with rules? Which if we decide as a whole we want to do that, that's the decision we make as a whole. And then someone has a home that has been built out of character, and then they want to go back and renovate it, put addition on, are they going to be precluded from doing that?
Well, and I think we have to try to consider, if there was a pre-existing home, right? If an addition is done, that I think the rules would have to exclude existing homes with any proposed additions up to a certain amount or something of that nature. I don't think there's any way you can retrofit a home that may be out of character with new guidelines.
So you want to have a glass home and say you have to put a Queen Anne addition on it,
No.
right?
No, obviously that's
Yeah,
not.
I know, I just
That-
want to say.
You'd have to exempt
Listen,
additions,
I don't have
right?
a problem, Tom, with what you're trying to do here. I want to be clear, but I just want to make sure that we come up with, I think it's not going to be 85% isn't going to be the problem. It's going to be the 15% outliers.
Absolutely.
And they got to realize how big are these outliers as a whole, where is it, what's going on, what's happening.
Right.
I mean, when that first house got built on Thornapple, the big, I mean, we were all like, what is this?
Right.
And now
Right.
suddenly it's like, oh, it's there, and with everything else going on around it, it is a difference.
Right. And that lot size for that home was a pre-existing large lot size.
Yes.
And that
Right.
couldn't get built.
It's like a double lot, right? The only way that can be built is if there's an existing lot that large.
No.
People can now not come
Buy
and
two homes and do it.
Yeah.
buy two homes and combine the lots.
And
We
did
have,
that after.
we did that after.
Right, but I'm
So
saying
we
right now,
now,
in the scope of things, it doesn't stand out as much as it
right.
did at
I
one
think
point.
One of the pieces, that we were talking about with the commercial, with the PVM, and the reason we incentivize it is realistically, they don't have to follow that standard. They can just build under the regular zoning,
Correct.
but they're using the PVM overlay because they're allowed to do more, there's more flexibility.
There is.
So realistically, if we wanted to look at this as some type of incentive to try to get a more classical, maybe it's a setback change, maybe the house coverage could be larger.
Right.
If you're doing something more traditional. I mean, just trying to think of ways to incentivize it as opposed to restrict it, where it gets a little bit more clumsy.
Right.
And I think if you do in that respect, with the reasonability, I don't want to be at a point someone says, fine, I'm willing to go by these rules, but you're gonna come back and tell me my windows need to be 8 inches smaller, or they need to be this. I think
That's why I was asking, like, how restrictive are you going to try to be?
And I think that's realistically, that's the question for it, if there's desire from the board, and if there's a consensus of, yes, let's evaluate this further, that could be punted to the planning commission to say, you guys are the planning commission, so you guys should be the ones that are really getting a little bit more into the weeds on this, but here's some of the guidelines or kind of conversation that was held at the board meeting.
Mhm.
But as long as I think the planning commission has an issue with someone says, how do we get to yes, rather than it's start with no and figure out how to get backwards. I think the key is how do we, be a collaborative township. I think it's one thing we've always been good at, but I think we gotta respect, if that's what our overlay is, we need to respect it, but we gotta find some way to be reasonable with people who wanna be here.
But in the new zoning ordinance, sneak preview for you, the option, if you will, on PVM, because almost everything done in PVM now is just done to the new incentivized standards. The PVM is going to become
The
codified.
Yeah.
That will become the zoning district downtown. You won't have a fallback position.
So you have
because-
some homes that people manage, I got in beforehand, and here I am, and
Right, and you'll see some of that. But a good example in PVM for the commercial structures is you can reduce parking, as you guys know, significantly, right?
Which for residential is not nearly,
Right, that's not as much of an
so
issue.
is there a legal risk of doing that? And then someone coming to us and saying, we're gonna sue the town, I wanna build a home here, I wanna do this, and, I mean, anyone can sue anybody for any reason, but is there an undue risk of?
yeah, I mean, it's definitely something we'd have to run by legal in terms of what's our exposure on these kinds of decisions, and if they're not dimensional, and if they're architecturally based.
Right.
Without a historic district, again, those are questions we haven't asked yet. We
Right.
wanted to see, one, if there's an appetite to even explore it before we kind of started going down that rabbit hole.
Right, and it gets, part of it too, for trying to get as much clarity as possible is, I looked up standards in one community, and I think it was a historic district thing. We've already been down that road here, right? That we've been out there twice, I think, prior to me. And there was not an appetite for creating a historic district in the community. So that kind of is a
That was when we
separate,
were trying to identify all the old homes and trying to identify all the.
right. So that's kind of a separate issue, right? There is some connective tissue, but it is still a separate topic. But to Julius's point, and yours too, Dan, is making sure that we're not having any language in any of our guidelines, any of our standards of review and anything else that is soft. In other words, somebody says, gee, we want to make sure that the homes are not garish and they don't do this and they don't, what does garish mean? Again, what is ugly, what is
Very
beautiful?
subjective.
We have 6, 8, 9 different opinions in this room of what those
Probably 12.
words are. Okay.
We can all change and shift.
Absolutely.
John, do you ever get calls?
the other
in-
thing-
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, one other thing. The other thing too is people, in those same set of standards I saw from another community, they talked about, and shall not negatively impact property values. Okay, fine, I get that, but, appraisers and assessors have different things, and I don't know that that would be an argument we could use here, because
You look at Bronson Street.
look at
and see what
Bronson
some
Street, and even though
houses listed for.
we've talked about some of the concerns about the scale, and it's building massing, right, that we see in a lot of this stuff down Bronson Street, but there's a home down there now that's close to, is valued, or priced at close to $3 million. You guys have seen that. So that's really not an issue either. So we've got to be, I feel like, yes, it has to be very objective and not subjective type standards. I'm sorry, you had a
Do
question?
you ever get calls of inquiry from people who are thinking of purchasing property? Like, I'm thinking of purchasing this lot, but I want to know like what your building restrictions are or whatever. And is that often?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. Like setbacks, lot
yeah,
sizes,
yeah.
those kinds of things. And honestly, we do spend a lot of time with people who, frankly, are trying to cut corners. Why can't you just let it go? Why can't I do this? I'm trying to do this for the community. I'm doing this, or I'm doing that. And it's like, well, the standards are what they are, and the community, as you all have talked about, has been very intentional about what it's done, starting with the master plan, right? The master plan was very intentional about having density down in this part of the community, having the northern, or the northern 2/3 of the community be more of a rural setting, and on and on. So there has been a lot of intentionality that's gone on here. And boy, that's a great thing for you guys to celebrate, right, as it related to the gentleman from the MSU Extension Service.
Right.
There's been a great strategy here with intentionality about where things can and should be happening.
I just wondered about that. Has there been negativity in that regard? Like people realizing, okay, here's what I'm allowed, here's what I can't do. Forget it. I don't want this property.
I think you probably see that sometime. There is a level of grumpiness out there for some people that are getting
just
grumpy.
wondered.
I don't know that sends them away, because honestly, I feel like the dynamics that Ada has allow us to be, I think, a little more, have more guidance, if you will, on what we're doing.
Yeah,
And-
well, we have a finite inventory of space, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's not very big.
And so that's why I'm very respectful of, Tom, what you've talked about with the idea of trying to be intentional about what are we trying to do here? And is there something we can do to try to reinforce our master plan goals and reinforce good design standards and these kinds of things? But yes, this is an age-old question. How do you balance individual preferences with trying to guide those and trying to respect that overall vision? I don't know that I have an answer for that. I think that's an eternal question that there may not be one right answer for.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So the primary question is there even an appetite for the planning department to be working on this? So I'm asking each of you, Dan, Aaron, you've expressed that you kind of feel there is some, that you just don't know how to approach.
Well, I think from what I'm hearing, and again, I think it's important to hear all the board's input on this, but at this point in time, I'm not sure it's really something that's necessary here in Ada, at least within the downtown district, which is the only area we even consider anyway.
You seem to have gone completely opposite of what you said at the start of this, that you didn't want glass houses, big flat roofs.
No, I don't know what a glass house entails, and the reality, I think we're using that as an example. Like, what's the probability of a glass house being built in Ada?
Well, all I know is if you, like, you could do it right now. If you go to ChatGPT or Google and say, show me a modern suburban American house, you're going to see a house that doesn't look like it fits.
Yeah, again, I mean, we have a master plan. People gravitate towards it because we have it. Now, has everybody followed those standards in the master plan? I'm getting the feeling that Visser's house wouldn't, correct?
No, I think Visser's house would.
It would, okay.
The reason,
Again,
here's the reason I say it would.
Exactly. So
Here's the reason, let me tell you why I say it would.
Okay.
Because the guidebook that I believe we should be using should have representation of the things that have been torn down.
Right, but that's your belief.
Well, hold on a second.
There's other people that are making the decision.
I'm saying that in the context, again, I keep falling back on the language within the master plan.
I understand that. I appreciate
The
that.
language within the master plan talks about the historic architecture that exists here and that we're trying to maintain. The house, the Visser house on the corner, is of the scale and massing of the exact house that was there before it was torn down.
A little cottage?
Yes. The only thing that they added differently was the annex with the garages is different, but there was a large barn outbuilding that was in the same space. But when you look at, I mean, if you just look at the trees they saved on the property, everything about that house, from a massing perspective, is very similar.
Like the one next door to it?
The new French one.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that one, I don't think, because we've never had a French-style house.
No, I know, I'm just making sure we're just.
I know, but so I like that house. I mean.
I don't dislike it necessarily, but I
Then
don't.
that is the issue. It's what you like and don't like.
You
and-
didn't let me finish. Would you let me finish, please? I don't dislike the house, but I do not believe it should be in Ada under our current master plan.
So then if we had guidelines, that house wouldn't have been built in Ada.
Correct.
And I like the house. That's just it.
But the house could be massed exactly the same, but architecturally, it should not be given what our master plan says.
Well, again.
And I think that we have a responsibility to follow a master plan unless we take the time to re-engage the community and undo the master plan so that houses like that can be there.
I don't think there's any need to undo the master plan. I think it's fine just the way that it is. Are we adhering to every aspect of the master plan to its exact word? Probably not. So.
Well, I would think that the intent of a master plan, there's been court cases that clearly support that the courts will rule with what a master plan says.
No, that hasn't been brought to us. I just feel that for the rare exception that the probability of something like what we're dreading happening is remote, and for all the administrative aspect, we can't even agree within this room.
Kevin,
That
when you have
it'd be formidable. That's all I'm saying.
When you have a population of residents with egos, as you expressed, and personalities, and we seem to have gravitated towards a level of what I call silly money in terms of what people are willing to spend, I would have no idea what could get built here, honestly.
Yeah, I don't either.
I do think that we are at a much higher risk because any normal builder, I mean, look at what Brad Rothschafer has done. That community is a masterpiece of a number of different architectural styles, but it has a sense, a depth, and a purpose to it that is supportive of what the history of our community was. Okay, and those are selling, and they're being built, and I don't know if there have been any more, I mean, if you've sensed a slowdown, if you've been talking to those guys about their building applications. But the point I'm trying to make is that I don't think that we should take lightly about, we could have a monstrosity. I guess that's all I'm trying to say.
I think we've addressed that in regards to the lot size, correct? I mean,
The lot size is a helpful factor.
correct.
It's a helpful factor.
No doubt about it. As is granting variances and things like that for setbacks and whatnot.
Right, and in reality, quick side note, apologies if it's a
I
rabbit.
apologize. I have a really hard stop. I have to pick up my daughter. Is everyone okay if I don't want to leave,
gotta
but
run
I mean, otherwise my daughter's gonna be sitting in a gym.
Okay. So, I feel like the ZBA and the Planning Commission have done a great job in following guidelines. You know, standards for variances, standards for special uses, standards for rezoning, all that. I feel like they've been doing a great job of that, all of that stuff. And so, once upon a time, a lot of times, guidelines might not have been followed. I don't know. I feel like for the last number of years, they've been doing a great job. So I will say that. But yes, people have individual goals. They have individual desires. I'm sorry. The other thing I was going to mention is, yes, the factor of the lot sizes and setbacks, now having maximum lot sizes, is a very helpful factor. Some of these questions, though, do get to massing, it seems like, the bulk of homes. What does that look like? What does that mean? How exactly can we go about addressing that? I'm honestly not sure. That probably is going to take a lot more research.
John, do you think that things have been, I mean, I agree with you that the Planning Commission and the ZBA have done a really good job. Are you comfortable with all of the work that you've put in, the due diligence that you do before every session? I mean, are you comfortable with all that?
You mean for the Planning Commission and zoning board meetings? Absolutely. And we often tell applicants, you've got to understand that it's about the standards. Are you meeting the standards? Are you not meeting the standards, or what? That's what we review. It's not on the basis of who you are, how long you've lived in the community, projects you've done before, your income level. It's all about the standards, and I feel like they've done a great job with that. And I feel like we as staff have really tried to work closely with both groups, and I feel like there's a great dynamic in that. I really do.
I trust your judgment.
But just, you trust his judgment, because specifically, right now in residential, the Planning Commission has nothing to do with it. Okay.
So
The
the
Planning Commission,
house next door and the Verbargi house or
No,
the
nothing to
Brownie
do with
house, that didn't go through anything, just.
no, the
they put
Planning
a
Commission had
submitted
nothing to
plan,
do with
goes
it.
and good.
The homes on along the like the French Colonial or whatever that just got built, and a couple of these others, they actually obtained zoning variances for their rear yard setbacks, and what was believed to apply there as a unique circumstance, which is a ZBA variant standard, is the fact that the only alley in the entire township
Right.
is right here. The only alley that we have.
But that went
But
to
there
the
was
Board
not,
of
but nothing on
Appeals.
the design of the build, of the house had to go in front of anybody.
Correct. There was no design review or requirements at all. It was only the rear yard setbacks for those 3 homes, or 4 homes. So yes, that's
Right,
correct.
the only recent residential related thing within the confines of the traditional village area that the Planning Commission did involve themselves with was right here next to Ada Insurance Center, where there was a proposal, and it got approved, for attached living units
Townhomes.
and a use of the PVM district to increase density. That didn't get in front of the Planning Commission under the PVM standards, though.
Because that was, to your point, Tom, that was not single family residential. That's attached
Right, and I believe currently that's 2 or 3
residential is-
lots,
townhomes.
and if that, his approval lapses, there's nothing to stop him at this point, and forgive me, what's his name?
Joel
Joel
Harner
Harner, excuse
let
me,
us
thank you. Joel
build.
Harner, from abandoning the whole plan that he got approved and say, well, I'm just gonna sell these as 3 separate lots. and the planning commission would never look at it again.
Yeah, or 2, whatever the number is. But yes, that's a great point, Tom, that could happen.
Right.
Even if his approval didn't expire, he could come in and make that application for that kind of thing.
Anyway, just to move, because we all want to go home. Could we, because we're also missing 2 very important voices, and can we just say, can we add this to continue talking about it when we meet at our joint meeting?
Sure. I do know that at the joint meeting, though, talk about a time frame. I know that there's going to be a program that Suzanne is going to want to present with summary information following on from the December 18th meeting, because there were some topics identified there, and then she's going to want to present all the stuff. Right, and then I know talk about planning ahead. I have an event that night myself, just like Julius did, so I know my time that evening of the joint meeting is going to be limited. So it's either that or separately, if you want to talk about it again, whenever, I can make time, or if that's another topic for is it the August 31st meeting or whatever that 5th Monday is that you're looking at, whatever the case may be, I'm happy to have that conversation.
Would be the August 31st meeting.
Yeah.
When is the joint meeting?
August,
On my calendar
I think it's Tuesday, August, let me look.
14th or something.
I thought you were gonna say the 4th.
I want to say it
I
is
was going with it.
18th.
the
18th.
18th. Yes, the
5
18th.
PM.
Yep, yep,
I got it on here.
3 p.m.
Sure.
So, yes, there's certainly an opportunity to talk about it, but I do know that there is a set agenda, if you will, for presentation of the zoning ordinance draft. So, kind of like tonight, right? You guys had a set agenda with the gentleman from the MSU Extension Service, and here we are extending that out a little bit, so.
The other
Sorry.
thing that's on here is, the August 31st, Julius has on the administrative committee's recommendation regarding the compensation commission, which we've been working on at the administrative committee level, so, but we could do both, I think.
At the joint meeting?
No, not at the
Oh.
joint meeting, the dedicated board meeting on the 31st. The only thing is it's after the planning commission's presentation, that's all.
Yeah.
So.
So I,
Are you gonna want at that meeting, the C, is that something you're gonna want to have a decision made at that, or is it more just a presentation discussion?
Well, unless you guys tell me otherwise, I'm just trying to move this forward one way or the other. I mean, you guys could shoot it down right now and it'll go away.
No, I don't wanna shoot it down, I just wanna make sure that this is something we need to talk about, think about before it comes up in a meeting. Is there anything, it's not a major, it says administrative committee recommendation.
No, the problem is that they're trying to wrap up and get ready to present to us the new zoning ordinance. And the hope, I think, had been to get some language in here related to it, but it sounds like it's too big of a topic, so that it could be siloed away, we can approve what they've been working on, and then it would be an additional amendment.
It would be like a follow-on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
yeah, and zoning ordinances are living documents anyway, right? They get changed and updated all the time.
Okay. All right. Any other board member comment? Okay, hearing none.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Just as a formality, additional for public comment. There's no other members of the public, so I'll open and close that. And then ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Support.
So we have a motion from trustee Hurwitz, supported by trustee Dancer, to adjourn at 6:30. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.